Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this Zoom media conference and Facebook live stream. Today, Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens is hosting an update and discussion with local housing and real estate professionals about the current housing climate. We welcome Mr. Tim Hudak, Chief Executive Officer of the Ontario Real Estate Association, Damon Winney, President of the Windsor-Essex County Association of Realtors, Vince Lapico, President of the Windsor-Essex Home Builders Association, Thom, the City of Windsor's City Planner, and Joe Baker, Manager of Permit Services and Deputy Chief Building Official at the City of Windsor. They are joined by representatives from our local media, while members of the public are able to observe via Facebook Live. Mayor Dilkens will provide some introductory remarks momentarily, followed by a discussion with today's panelists. We will conclude with questions from the media. A reminder that participants must turn your own microphones on and off, and please ensure that your camera is enabled through the entire session, but only turn your microphone on when speaking. Media members, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom screen to request a question. And once the conversation is wrapped up, media members will be called upon then. Thank you for your attendance and participation today. I'll turn things over to Mayor Dilkens to start us off now. Your Worship.
Well, thanks very much, Dana. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And it's certainly not an overstatement to call the current local real estate market a boom. Over the last 5 to 6 years, many Windsorites have seen the value of their houses double, bidding wars driving offers that are sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking prices, while building is at a rate not witnessed in this city for many decades. And as you'll hear today, the breakneck speed of growth over the last 12 months is just staggering. The average home price in Windsor-Essex has risen by 25% since February 2020. And each month since July, the total number of homes sold has outpaced the same months in the previous year. And as we head into the busy moving season, March saw an 11% increase in new listings from last year. New home construction is also on the rise. New builds grew from 360 in 2018 to almost 800 in 2020, according to our building stats and our building permit stats. Meanwhile, permits for home upgrades also jumped. Whether it's teardowns, rental projects, or additional dwelling units, residents are looking for ways to add value or improve their current homes instead of trying to move. And the pandemic has also played a part in these trends. The ability to work from home means Windsorites that pursued work out of town can return to be near friends and family while continuing in the same career. And of course, while vacations and shopping and dining and other travel or entertainment expenses are not largely happening, residents are finding it easier to save up competitive down payments. Now, Windsor still remains one of the most affordable places to live in the country, and we've always offered a welcoming community to out-of-town post-secondary students as well as to newcomers to Canada. And for a long time, people have viewed our city as the perfect place to start a career or a family, or to retire when the time comes. And the City of Windsor and the surrounding communities are evolving. You've heard me speak about Windsor Works, our economic development strategy for the city's future growth that leverages the strengths that we already have. Windsor's proximity to Detroit and Toronto, coupled with our ongoing investments in city infrastructure and the technology sector, has caused the rest of the province and the country to take notice of what we have to offer right here. This, along with the city's community improvement plans and incentivized residential development, is turning heads of developers, of investors, and of entrepreneurs alike. And while this boom brings a host of benefits to the city, no great gain comes without challenges. And I often think about my own daughter, who will soon be graduating from the University of Windsor's nursing program, and it's an excellent degree and an excellent career path. And as a fully qualified nurse, undoubtedly she'll be looking forward to a relatively comfortable wage in just a couple of years. But I, like all parents, want to see her secure and settle in a place of her own one day. And I can't help but wonder how much further down her timeline does a market like this move her potential for home ownership? Where is the ceiling on this level of growth? And it all comes together in a bustling real estate market that has left many Windsorites wondering how it all happened and what's next. And that's why I'm pleased to welcome our guest today for an update and a discussion about the current trends in the real estate landscape, projections for the months and years to come, and to hopefully answer some of the most common questions that I'm hearing from residents. So first, I'd like to welcome someone who's no stranger to Windsor, a good friend of Windsor for a long, long time, Mr. Tim Hudak, the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association and former leader of Ontario's opposition. Tim, thanks very much for taking the time to join us today. And I have a strong feeling that you're going to tell us that Windsor is not alone in this trend.
Well, no, but Windsor's not alone, but they're doing really well, as they should. Thanks, Mayor Dilkens. Great to see you again, and thank you for your personal leadership on this issue, that the Canadian dream of homeownership can stay alive for Windsor families, young people, and folks who want to move to Windsor. So thanks for your leadership. calling this together, and that of the Windsor Council as well. And you're right, I'm a big fan of Windsor. I love coming to the community. I'm a border boy myself, but from the other end of Highway 3 down in Fort Erie. And I think, your worship, just like me growing up, when it comes to smaller cities and towns, we always envisioned that we could buy a home in the neighborhood we grew up in. But that's becoming increasingly challenging for, your daughter's generation and young Windsor families today. People want to move there. So I'm going to give a bit of perspective here on what's happening province-wide. I'll be brief, a bit of an indication too on who's moving to Windsor. And then I know Damon Winney, who's our head of the Windsor-Essex County Association of Realtors, will give you the facts on the ground in the community. So that sound okay? All right, so I can share my screen. Can I actually share the screen, Dana? Thank you. So here we go. So real estate is one of Ontario's biggest industries. This is a good perspective here on what is happening with dollar volume of sales over the years, province-wide. And you can see that spike in what's happened in February of 2021. March will even be higher. And Mayor Dilkens explained a number of those reasons. It's really psychology and mathematics. Psychology, people are looking for more space as a result of COVID. They're looking for a place where maybe they can live in Windsor and report to the headquarters in Toronto or London and enjoy the community. The mathematics, mortgage rates are low, and people who have been in the COVID haves, who have been fortunate to keep their jobs during this crisis, have more disposable income. So next slide will show you how we surveyed the general population in the province of Ontario, and we found that psychological impact is real. Homeownership has always been a big part of Canadian culture, right? It's where we raise our families. It's a great investment that pays off over time. It's the place where our fondest memories are. That's why there's this driving part of Canadian culture to own a home. But we're seeing now, because of COVID and the opportunities from work from home, a greater interest in larger spaces, both inside the home, to have a work from home office space, maybe to have grandma move in with you, and also to have a yard to kick around the soccer ball with your daughter, for example. So we're seeing more people also that want to live in smaller cities, rural and northern areas compared to the bigger cities. You see that 60% increase as a result of COVID year on year. So our next slide will talk about what's actually happening with the GTA, this mass exodus. Well, let me tell you what's really happening. There has been a substantial movement of people who live in the city of Toronto because of COVID and work from home to non-GTAs. It's actually up 38% compared to where it was last year. And this data, by the way, comes from our partners at TerraNet, the Land Registry Service. They've got the best data anywhere in the province of what's happening between regions. We also saw a 27% increase of GTA to non-GTA and from Toronto to the GTA. But it's not like Toronto is going to turn into, Atlanta and Walking Dead, right? It's not that cities are going to be going downhill. They're going to have a very bright future, but you're seeing people who always wanted to live in Windsor or Essex accelerating those decisions, having an opportunity to work from home. But the overall change in the market, that's only 6% of total interactions. So a change on the margins plus, but it's benefiting your area a lot. So let me show you in the next slide how that's happening. So what does that mean for smaller communities like your own? Well, 17.6% of all overall activities. And for TerraNet's data, Windsor's a city, but it's classified as rural. They only use the biggest cities as urban. So when I say rural, I'm actually talking about areas like Windsor and certainly Essex County. We saw a big increase across the province of purchases from the city of Toronto, 54.5% increase, and a 44% increase from Peel and Ottawa to other major centers in non-urban areas. No surprise here. No, Damon will give a lot more detail. If they come from the big city, the home they're buying on average is a much higher ticket item than somebody who already lives in Windsor or buying their first home in Windsor or moved from another small city. So there's some province-wide stats on what it means for communities like yours and mine. And my next slide will tell you a bit about what's happening in Windsor specifically. So what does this mean? Well, where are people coming from that the mayor mentioned are rediscovering what an awesome thing it is to live in Windsor, raise your family, to work and to enjoy the environment? Well, 40% of sales right now happening in Windsor are actually people already homeowners in Windsor. The next biggest category, first-time home buyers. I can't tell you where they came from because TerraNet tracks where you sold your house and where you moved to. Two biggest categories, people who are in Windsor, and then people who are first-time home buyers. But the next big category is people coming from the larger cities, including the GTA. So where is the biggest growth happening? Looking at January to March of this year compared to the 3 months pre-COVID of last year, well, Toronto's had 114% growth. Typically, there are about 100 folks a year who move from Toronto to Windsor that TerraNet detects. So that's up 114% from last year. York has been the big area. And then, of course, Hamilton. Much lower number of transactions coming from Hamilton, but you can see the growth. And then no surprise, Southwestern Ontario, Waterloo, and London folks increasingly moving to the Windsor area, and then Halton, big growth. So I'll share this deck with the panelists and the media as well, if you like, your worship. But there's kind of all the new people you're welcoming to the community who are discovering what a great place is to live in Windsor, or people, as you said, coming back home. That's where they're coming from. And thank you for the time.
Hey, thanks very much, Tim. Appreciate those stats. Very, very interesting. And I appreciate the time you took to join the conversation today. And I'm sure we'll hear more from you in the discussion in just a few minutes. Next, we'll welcome Damon Winney. He's the president of the Windsor-Essex County Association of Realtors and the broker of record at Jump Realty. And the association locally includes over 1,000 members, 71 firms. And each month, the association releases comprehensive data about the housing market in the region. And Damon has certainly been a trusted source and resource and reference to many buyers and investors following these trends. So Damon, thanks for being here, and please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Mayor Drew Dilkens. I appreciate that. It's quite the privilege to be here amongst some well-known people here in Windsor and beyond. So thank you very much for everybody joining us here today. So as you mentioned, the Windsor-Essex County Association of Realtors, we represent over 1,100 members here locally. And, you know, we, like the residents of the area here in Windsor, have continued to see the reactions of people amongst ourselves is included here with regards to the rising prices. And I think the statistics that Mr. Hudak just gave us were outstanding. In fact, I love to know where those people were coming from, and TerraNet's obviously a great source of that information. We've been looking for that, so thank you very much, Mr. Hudak. But when we look at the prices here locally, I think I want to render that back down to affordability. So the concern here locally is affordability in the area. And we've seen prices increase successively from 2017 all the way through to today, maybe with some stops and starts, with some policy changes, maybe the stress test that was introduced in 2018, as well as obviously the most recent lockdown that we've had in 2020, and then again, just recently in the last few days. So what does that mean to people who are looking to get into real estate? So those first-time home buyers, Mr. Hudak, that you referenced there. So 25% of those people entering the market here locally, I think the slide deck showed. It shows great intent to get into the market, and we have an enormous demand down here. So we've got people obviously coming in from outside jurisdictions, but we have very strong demand here locally as well. So what we've seen happening in the actual market itself is people requesting, and I think, again, you alluded to it here in your slide deck, was people are looking for more space, whether it be internally within the home for a home office, additionally for more space outside of their yard. So we've got local residents here actually moving away, if you will, into the greater, let's call it the greater Essex County, but we've got people moving into the county to exercise their right to gain more space as well. So there's been an increase in cottage country properties here locally, as well as, you know, properties that have got more acreage. So we've seen significant demand in those areas as well. What does that mean for first-time home buyers? Mayor Dilkens, you mentioned before that your daughter was coming out of nursing school as a graduate. I think for a lot of people, the lens looks very dark right now for them because they're very concerned about the affordability and the supply. And hopefully today we can address some of those supply demand concerns, because we have seen sales continue to outstrip demand all the way through. And in fact, this most recent month of March that we've got the full month statistics on is the first month in many months that we've actually had more supply enter the market than we have had since March of 2020. So it's reassuring. And in fact, what we're seeing here locally in terms of activity in the market is a little bit of a tempering. And that could be a resultant of the most recent stay-at-home order. But I think it's also a function of that supply coming back into the market. So as realtors, we see a lot of activity, a lot of unfortunate buyers who miss out and gain into the market at some particular point. But the supply issue is really what we're concerned about. So hopefully today we can address some of that. Thank you very much. Hopefully I have my mic off.
Loud and clear. Thank you.
This is my technical difficulty here. Sorry. Damon, thanks very much. I really appreciate those remarks and those comments. And now I'll turn it over to Vince Lapico, who's the president of the Windsor-Essex Home Builders Association. And Vince represents a really unique membership of builders and renovators, land developers, trade contractors, building product suppliers, and many more. He's also the president of VLC Customs Homes, and I'm grateful that he made time to join us today. Nice to see you, Vince. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mayor Dilkens, for having me here. Just going to give you guys some pretty much basic information. You'd be surprised how many people actually work in the renovation and construction industry here in Windsor. In Windsor alone, there's about 8,300 people who work in construction that do home renovations or do home construction or building or things of that nature. The information that we have is based off statistics that was from Stats Canada, essentially. I was just looking for the exact name, but Stats Canada, and it was based at 2019. The 2020 data hasn't come out yet, but it's responsible for about $529 million worth of local wages. So that's a pretty substantial amount of money, and it represents about $896 million in investment in our local community. So that works pretty well. It's a pretty big market. The next slide here. We'll talk about renovations, repairs. So there's about 4,700 people that work in renovations. That's a substantial group of people. And thankfully, through all the lockdowns and stuff, we've been able to carry on. I don't want to say business as usual because it's far from business as usual, but we've been able to carry on doing renovation work. There's been some issues with a lot of our renovation teams that are hesitant to go into existing homes where there's other people. The new construction industry has been going pretty well because it can be kind of a controlled job site, but for renovations where you're working in people's homes, there's been a lot of people that have been really leery about carrying on with those projects. But those home renovations, those are worth about $300 million a year in wages. That's a pretty significant investment in our area. So let me just go to the next slide here. New home construction is kind of our forte. That's what we do a lot of. We also do a lot of renovations as well. But in 2019, there was 1,345 new construction starts, which is pretty big. The new construction is, in my opinion, one of the biggest drivers of the local economy. There's just so much stuff that happens, with the new construction. There's just so many different people and companies and things that are involved in that entire process. We're getting to a point now where we're getting landlocked, essentially, where we have more supply than we have more demand than we have supply. So there seems to be a bit of a land issue currently. We're trying to get some more lands developed. There's a lot of municipalities that are having issues with their infrastructure and things like that to get, all that land online so that it can be developed. But I know that's something that we're working on diligently to kind of get going. And that's pretty much all I have in reference to this. So thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks very much, Vince. Appreciate those comments. And as you can see on the screen, we're joined by two members of the city administration team today. Thom Hunt is our city planner. Joe Baker is the manager of permit services and the deputy chief building official, and both work very, very closely with these associations as well as the individual residents who are coming forward looking for planning information and trying to get building permits. So gentlemen, thanks very much for being here, and please take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Dilkens. Dana, do you want to? So I'm just going to kind of bring up the tail end of the discussion here, and then I can turn it over to Thom for some additional comments. But here you can see a graph. I've kind of depicted the last 8 years total construction value in the city of Windsor, and you've got the four various categories. You've got residential, industrial, commercial, institutional. Residential, you can see for the most part has been the dominant category. Within the last 2 years alone, we've been over 225 million in 2019 and 250 million in 2020. So definitely the trend has been that residential construction has been on the increase in Windsor, and here you can see the data that supports that. Dana, next slide, please. Here again, another fun stats on building permits issued. So you can see the total permits that we've issued each year between the same time slot of 2012 and 2020. Generally, residential makes up about 80% of the permits that we issue. And in the last few years, actually since 2017, I think Damon mentioned earlier about 2017, you saw the kind of the market, a competitive market really turning up. But you can see here that the residential permits really took a spike there and have kind of tailed off a little bit. But residential has certainly been a big part of what we do year in and year out, and more so over the last few years as well. Next slide, please, Dan. So here's just some quick facts and some of the trends that we're seeing here in building and planning, and definitely Thom can elaborate, I'm sure, on some of this. But the first one we have here is the City of Windsor basically issues over 3,000 permits annually for a variety of construction projects, and 80% of that on average is residential related, as I mentioned earlier. In the last 4 or 5 years, that average has risen another 5 to 7%. So we're seeing that push for residential renovations, additions, additional dwelling units. There's a number of things that are really going on in the market here in the last few years. Next stat, basically saying that, again, 50% of the annual construction value that we support in our economy here is attributed to residential construction. And last year, actually, that number rose to about 65%. So again, this year, we're expecting it to be pretty high. Already we've started off with a good year. Next statement here, essentially the total value of construction 2020 was $392 million. Again, $250 million of that was related to the residential industry. And this year so far, we're up $1 million over where we were in the first quarter of last year. The next point I wanted to mention essentially is something of note. Mayor Dilkens mentioned earlier in his opening remarks, is that we've seen, I guess, between the period of 2012 and 2018, just to put it in perspective, we only created 71 new apartment condo residential units within that time period. Well, in the last 2 years, in 2019 and 20, we did 551. And there's a few hundred more of those expected this year. So we're really seeing a trend towards the multi-dwelling residential apartment condo buildings that are being constructed. I've got a list in front of me here that's, we've got another 5 to 10 this year that we're expecting, permits to go out the door on. And with that, a few hundred more units being created. So as of April 14th today, we've got 108, units that have gone out the door that are apartment condo style. So already this year, we're up in over 100, and we're expecting that to be closer to the 300 range, most likely by the end of the year. Next slide, please, Dana. The one thing I also wanted to mention that late in 2018, the city, the province, we took on, the approving authority for additional dwelling units, which has been a big trend that we've seen, at least since then, with 14 permits issued in 2019. I think, the industry was just becoming familiar with what those were. And last year we saw a significant increase, up to 58 permits issued for what's called additional dwelling units. And we're expecting the numbers again this year to be similar to as they were in 2020. So definitely something to consider for those of you, that want to, build an additional dwelling unit for yourself, your family, for the creation of additional units. And then just a couple more points I wanted to bring up. The development charges the city, mayor and council have approved, the bylaw that we've approved in the city. There's an area called the downtown core, which is basically north of Tecumseh Road and bounded by Colette in the east and Prince Road in the west. Development charges are essentially exempt in that area as of now. And, over the last, since January 1 of last year, we've actually seen 60 permits issued for the creation of residential units within that area. So certainly it's an older area of the city that we're looking to intensify with, residential units. And that shows to me, and I'm sure to others, that this is certainly working. And there are other exemptions. Just I wanted to make a few. If you're building an additional dwelling unit, you don't have to pay development charges. If you're converting a commercial building, let's say downtown, which we're seeing, quite a few of the interest in that as well, to residential use, you don't pay development charges. So number of things out there that developers are looking at and taking on, and we're certainly seeing the trend towards intensifying the residential units within the city. So that's all I really had, Tom. I don't know if you want to add to that or.
Sure, I will. Thanks, Joe. The points I would make are that I think in addition to what building has been able to do with development charges reductions, in planning, we've never been more busy in my experience, and I've been with the city over 22 years. And we haven't seen the growth in our city since, I would say, 1970, 1980. And as Joe mentioned, it's really the multi-unit residential that's driving a lot of our economy. So these are larger developments and dense developments like apartment buildings and condominium towers that we're seeing an increase in applications. And we've been really well positioned professionally and administratively to handle the volume. So in COVID times, and I think Vince and Tim mentioned this, and Damon as well, we've never been busier, and a lot of downturn in a lot of economic sectors. But in the planning and building and construction sectors, we've never seen a boom quite like this. And we were well positioned electronically to be able to keep working from home, get push permits out, planning approvals out. So the community improvement plans that the mayor had mentioned are really significant. So in geographic areas of the city, in addition to our development charges reductions, we also have CIPs and incentives available in Sandwich, downtown, Ford City, a number of other areas that are really driving the intensification that Joe had mentioned. And so it's a great win-win. We're seeing greenfield development, as was mentioned, I think by Damon, that there's a bit of a lag in terms of being able to provide that infrastructure and planning approvals to realize the demand. But we've been able to realize and capture demand in core areas of the city that hadn't seen a lot of redevelopment in decades. And that was attributed to a combination of our community improvement plan incentives, as well as the development charge reductions that council was able to put in place. So from that framework, we think we have a really robust economic model locally to make it very attractive to come to the city of Windsor and Essex in general. And from that standpoint, I think the migration that Tim had mentioned really speaks to why people are out migrating and looking to this area to land investment as well as future homes. So those are my remarks, Mr. Mayor, and I hand it over back to Dana.
So I'll thank you, Tom. Thank you, Joe. I'll take it. And we've got a few questions that certainly, I'm hearing from residents, and clearly we're talking about building homes and home ownership, but we also know this has an impact on the rental market as well. As prices increase, people are looking to get a return on the investment, and rents are going up, and we have very low vacancy rates here. So it plays itself out acutely in a positive way if you own the home, but if you don't own the home, it also plays it out in a very difficult way. And frankly, for us, it's just something we're not used to seeing here in the community, but for the last 4 or 5 years, things have certainly changed. And so I've got a few questions. I'll direct them to individuals, but certainly we can do a round robin here. And if people have other ideas or opinions, feel free to jump in if that's okay. So the first question I have is for Tim, and it's just are there 1 or 2 key indicators, Tim, that you're watching to get a sense of where this market is heading?
Yeah, and I think Damon can give you the best on the ground there in Windsor, Your Worship. But province-wide, to me, it's supply. And what's happening right now is it's a very cruel game of musical chairs, where you have more and more people circling fewer and fewer chairs. So as housing inventory goes down, there are more people who will engage in bidding wars. Prices go up. There'll be frustrated buyers. I see Damon nodding. He's had to deal with that. It's a better problem to have than the opposite, but the affordability crisis is going to cause in large cities and small is a big concern for the provincial government. And I'm happy to hear, Your Worship, about your leadership here and report from the town staff and the city staff on creating more supply. That's terrific. So number 1 for me is supply. Number 2 is probably the cost of borrowing. So mortgage rates remain low. They should remain low for a while. All indicators would suggest. But as you may know, the biggest part of buying a home is not really the mortgage payments themselves. Often they can be cheaper than rent in some areas. It's affording the down payment. So the ability to accumulate savings and having a mortgage rate people can afford, that will really drive the demand side.
Anyone else on that? Any ideas? Damon, I guess I would come to you and then just say, thinking about someone like my daughter or people who are trying to look for a down payment, trying to afford a house in this market, a first home. Do you have any advice about folks who are sort of at that stage of life in a market like this? What should they consider? That's a good question. One that we get asked often, more times than I can care to share with you. But realistically, I think Mr. Hudak actually had a really good point here, which was with regards to people coming into the market. If we just reflect maybe on this past 12 months, give or take, back to March of last year, when people have been returned to their homes, I think what we're seeing here locally, and not specifically with regards to your daughter coming out of nursing, but what we're seeing is people have managed to actually maybe save money over the past 12 months, maybe being at home, maybe staying with mum and dad, I'm not sure, given that she's a local girl here at the University of Windsor. But if you're able to save up over those past 12 months, you've got a healthier deposit to go down on a property. So that lends itself a little bit better in terms of now being able to afford one of these homes moving forward. So Mr. Hudak was talking about the low interest rates, which are, I would love to say keep them low for a long time, but I think that they will eventually balance this out for us. But for new entrants coming into the market, looking first-time home buyers, it's very, very competitive. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to maybe suggest to her. Obviously, she's picked a great vocation in the nursing field. That's a steady income for a long time, and her earning propensity will increase over time. So even if she was to get into the market today, and I think we'll all agree that we've heard that prices are high. So if we have a look at the long-term value of a home, if we have a look at a high price today, let's just consider it high. Over the course of history, these prices continue to trend upward. So we may see blips in the future. We may be stealing a bit of demand from next year or the year after, but housing is a great long-term investment. And so my advice for your daughter, if I may be bold enough to give some to her, would be to invest now as soon as you can, save up that deposit. Maybe if we can get some help from mum and dad too, there's a little plug for her. But, if she can enter the market, I don't see downsides to her for the long term. And again, if she's willing to invest today, she'll create long-term equity. And that affordability question that is raised time and time again, I think it's muted somewhat if we look at the long term. So we can look at timestamps today and say we're up 25%, 30%, whatever they may be. But let's look at the long term. And I think long-term value and equity gains for her would be the reason for her to get into the market sooner rather than later. So Thom and Joe, I would ask you with respect to even what you put on the screen there, Joe, and council approved the waiving of development charges in a certain area. Are we at a point now where the city should, in your opinion, consider expanding the waiver of development charges for ADUs citywide, or increase the perimeter of that offering?
It's a good question, Mayor. The CIPs that we did produce come with a 5-year revisitation on the timelines to say, are they still needed? Do they need to be increased or reduced? And I think geographically, the answer is going to be yes in some places and no in some other places. So I think it's a bit of a nuanced approach. There's areas of the city that I don't think need a push, if you will, or incentive to develop. And that we still have some areas that we'd like to see a little bit more robust development. So my thought is that we would do that in a targeted way.
Just to add to that too, thanks, Thom. Mayor Dilkens, you mentioned ADUs. Well, we do not collect development charges for ADUs at all at anywhere in the city. So the downtown core area is across the board, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, that is completely exempt. But additional dwelling units, if you were to build one anywhere within the city, we would not assess development charges for that development. So
great. So Vince, you thought you were going to be left unscathed without a question, but I'll lob you a softball, and just, I guess I'm curious, when you're talking to clients, what do they cite as the biggest advantage to investing in Windsor at this time? And are you seeing people, as Tim showed in his slides, coming from outside of the community looking to to build homes?
Yeah, actually, the last few homes we've sold, there's been people that came from Hamilton and GTA. They have huge equity in their product back home. And when they come here, they can get much bigger product, much nicer product. I shouldn't say nicer, but more bang for their buck. And one of the things that people really talk about is our climate, how much nicer our climate is here compared to, GTA or whatever. It's not as much snow. It's not as much traffic. It's not, it's a nice hometown feel, but kind of a big city in the shadow of the border, right? So, I mean, it's a really good place to be. People enjoy our amenities. And when things go back to normal and people are able to cross the border, there's shopping, there's sports, there's all sorts of wonderful things here, and it's a great place to be.
So Damon, are you seeing the same thing in terms of customers coming here? Are you getting a lot of outside interest?
There we go. Yes, we are. We see considerable interest coming from outside of the area. And again, coming back to, it seems like a bit of a mantra, but we're very affordable down here. So, since 2008, I think there was a marketing collaborative that was initiated by the Windsor Chamber of Commerce, the Windsor-Essex County Association of Realtors, as well as, other parties involved, including the city of Windsor, I believe, to bring people down here. Now, Vince just mentioned the climate. I call it the Caribbean of Canada. I'm an import myself. I'm not too fond of snow. Windsor is just awesome in comparison to that. I like to go to a hill and ski on snow, and that's about the level of snow that I would love to enjoy. However, our climate's fantastic. The affordability in terms of, maybe cashing out of larger cities and coming down here. They're able to actually come down here with marginal, if anything, in terms of a mortgage. And, when they're coming down here, they're bringing to our area jobs, purchasing power, creation of wealth here locally. So it's benefiting everybody. And again, when we have people coming into town, we welcome them with open arms. It does kind of juxtapose against, the people here locally that have traditionally seen prices slowly increase. And now we've got this, more rapid increase in pricing. So yeah, we do see interest coming in because of the return on investment for investment properties, because of the low cost of housing here, the large urban space that you gain when you do move here. You're not on top of each other. You're not living in a condo building worried, especially during COVID, going up and down an elevator with other people that may be, worried about contracting COVID-19. So there's lots of benefits here locally. And that's why we are seeing increased demand, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, we'll leave the conversation there for now and invite questions from the media. First, let me just reiterate that this level of growth, the attraction, the interest, and the investment in the city is really a phenomenon that is positioning Windsor for fantastic opportunities to build back better. And we know that thriving cities attract top talent and investment, and population growth means additional resources for further city investment in infrastructure, in culture, and large-scale projects like districting, new amenities, and improvement plans. And the recent commitment to our new hospital system by the province will provide a huge attraction to professionals and organic growth in industrial and residential space as well. And as the city of Windsor makes these gains, we're staying committed to energy efficient, comfortable, affordable housing solutions for those needing assistance as well. And I think of our 10-story Meadowbrook Lane development that continues construction today. On the east side, 145 affordable units and 5 supportive units for youth as well. And we are investing huge record numbers in our capital budget, 1.6 billion over the next 10 years, 170 million this year alone. And so we're building the city up. And I'll tell you, I've been living in Windsor my entire life, and I've seen the incredible highs of my youth and some darker days when we faced significant economic headwinds during the 2009 recession. As a city councillor, and certainly now as mayor of the city, I'll take the challenge of governing during a boom over a decline any day of the week. And the challenge of affordability, of course, presents an opportunity to help lift everyone up in our community. And we need to remember that and work on that as we continue to see this record development. So thank you all for being here. We know we can't do this alone from a city perspective, that it's going to take coordinated policy responses from the provincial level, from the federal level as well. And we're certainly committed to do our part. We've put our money where our mouth is, and we'll continue to support investments that will help bring this community and make this community move forward each and every day. So thank you all for being here. With that, I'll open the floor to media questions and turn it over to Dana.
Thanks very much, Mayor Dilkens. Our first question is coming from Rob Hindy with AM 800. Rob, please go ahead, enable your microphone.
My question is for Tim. Tim, I'm not sure if I missed this in your presentation, but was this expected, or if not, what changed in the past few years?
Sorry, Tim, you're muted there.
I followed your instructions too closely there, Dana. I politely muted.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, Rob, great hearing from AM 800. I used to have a radio show on that station, so my favorite Windsor radio station. There's really two phenomena that have accelerated this process, and there was one that is expected. So the two that accelerated it, we spent a year now cooped up in our homes. And as a result of that, people have said, you know what, there's these certain things I don't like about my current place. They've done a lot of deep thinking about what their next place should look like. And that trend has been to more spaces within the home and outside of the home, like a yard, a garden. Positives for Windsor and Essex. The second reality has been our greater comfort now in work from home, which allows more people to live in Windsor and report to the headquarters in a bigger city, or maybe accelerate plans to semi-retirement. So those two factors have really put rocket fuel into demand, and you're really well placed for it. The one, Rob, that was expected and is also kicking in now is that millennials are the largest generation in Canadian history. And they are now moving into the years where they're having kids, they're getting married, they're getting promotions at work, and they're really interested in the housing market. I think Windsor is really well poised to capitalize on all three of those opportunities. And I commend the mayor here, and I love what I heard from staff, because I tell you, in other cities, they're going the opposite direction, where they're making it harder to get a house, harder to develop a property. Waiving development charges to pave the way from new homes is great for homeowners. And for every home that's purchased in the province, there's about $83,000 in spin-off activities. Renovations to the home, new furniture, new appliances, paying the movers. There is no better engine to get the local economy going than a housing transaction.
Thank you. My second question is for Vince. Vince, just in regards to what you're hearing from your colleagues, obviously we're seeing all over the place that the price of lumber is going up. What are you hearing from your colleagues in that sense? Because at the end of the day, I'm guessing if lumber is going up, the prices of these houses will also be going up. New builds will be going up as well.
Absolutely. It's not just lumber. There's actually a big shortage right now of resins. You would be surprised how much resin products are involved in building a house. For example, PVC piping. Average house has 26 pieces of PVC piping in it for your drainage system. And it's just not available right now. The majority of it, unfortunately, is made overseas. And when they reinstated getting all that stuff back online, they're supplying their own markets because their markets are on fire right now. So we're having a very hard time getting simple things like drain pipe. So unfortunately, it costs everything to go up, because as we all know, when there's less supply, there's more demand, it equals a higher price. So it's really across the board. It's not just lumber, it's everything. And the other thing too is labor costs. Labor costs are going up too, because there's such a high demand for skilled labor that these people are charging more money. And not that it's right or wrong, but it's understandable. So the more you're in demand, the more you can charge, as long as you're fair and reasonable. I mean, I don't see any reason for it to stop.
Thanks very much, Rob. Media, please ensure that your name on Zoom is appearing as your first and last name or media outlet. Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Rich Garten at CTV. Rich, please go ahead, enable your microphone.
Good morning, all. So my general read of this conversation is that this hot housing market is great for people who own and are building up equity, and also for people who have a vested interest in growth and development. But it's maybe bad for people who don't have those things or want those things. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So while you don't want to throw cold water on the market, how can we reduce market barriers for those people looking for entry into the market, those first-time home buyers who can't compete with people who are maybe bidding from out of town, sight unseen, no conditions, bidding wars that are going, hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking prices? How do you help them compete?
Yeah, so I think, Rich, I take that question as one I think that lands in the planning portfolio. Number one is we have a number of incentives that we can provide to try and level the playing field, if you will, for folks that may not have the same kind of buying power that people from the GTA do coming into our market. So what we've done is we're really looking at an affordable housing strategy, providing incentives to make sure that folks can get housing and have entry-level housing markets available. Right now, I think from the panelist discussion, it's really a boom economy in terms of a lot of the units that are being out there, but a lot of those are high-end units. And what we're not seeing related to the mayor's question is, do we need to reduce development charges on more affordable units? And I think that that's something we're going to have to take a serious look at. All of my colleagues in Ontario and major cities are having the same problem. And the provincial government is also looking at providing a range of policy changes and incentives along those lines, because while it's not a unique problem to Windsor, it's certainly something across the province that all municipalities are struggling with.
Tim, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. I know Damon's got local perspective, so I'll give the province-wide one. The number one rule for government should be do no harm. There's always going to be temptations to bring in new taxes or new red tape. That's actually will do more harm than good. For example, if you bring in a home equity tax to say that people have to pay a tax on their capital gains, people will say, well, I'm not going to sell my house. I'm going to stay here until I'm a senior citizen. So I think it's hard to get a house now for a first-time home buyer. That will make it nearly impossible. Number one, do no harm. Number two, I think the province should reward municipalities like Windsor who are being pro-home ownership, who are welcoming more people to their community. How could they do that? Well, every year there's an infrastructure budget that comes from the province. They could prioritize communities for roads, tunnels, bridges, water, sewer, who are being pro-home ownership and not trying to stop people. So you could check off that box. We've also produced a paper that you can see at our website, orea.com, O-R-E-A.com, that has ideas for small towns, small cities, and big opportunities. A big part of that is expanding natural gas access and broadband, because a lot of realtors' number one question they're getting now is, how are the doctors? How are the schools? They still get those, but the top question now, how is the internet service? The province can do a lot to open up housing opportunities that way. Final point on this, the province has a role, I think, to reduce red tape and overlap. I know the mayor's spoken about this, but conservation authorities do an excellent job when it comes to protecting watershed, but some have grown too far and they're throwing up more obstacles to welcome growth that is environmentally balanced in home ownership. So making sure we stay in our lane and not throw up more walls is important for government, and conservation authorities are a good example of that.
Go ahead, Damon.
Yes, thank you. So Rich, to speak to your point there, I think, and this is my interpretation here, but I would estimate that once we get through a little bit further down the COVID-19 path here, with immunizations, et cetera, and the economy starts to reopen to its fullest entirety, I believe that we've had a lot of people who have been in lockdown, and maybe and Vince was talking about the domestic numbers here locally, about the investment in renovations. I think we've seen that locally, and aging in place, so forth. And I think that maybe there's been a concern with, maybe can I find a house during this period of time? So people have actually been holding back on listing their home for sale as well. So, there's other measures here governmentally that locally that we can have assistance with in increasing supply. But I think that we will see a natural opening of the gates once we exit the COVID-19, and supply will normalize once again. We've been playing catch up. We lost a ton of residential sales through 2020. I think we lost over 700 sales in the year of 2020. And that's significant for our area. So once we get more supply domestically in the current resale market, that will alleviate some of the price pressure, as well as some of the competitiveness that I think really irks some people at this particular point. So that supply will certainly ease up a little bit in the future. So that's just a little tidbit where I think the market may be going.
Follow up?
Yeah, maybe to Tim, you mentioned that government regulation or maybe over-regulation wouldn't be the way. is there a right way for the government to assist in this, and which level of government would it be that has the best ability to, again, not throw cold water on the market, but to make sure that it remains somewhat fair for that first-time home buyer?
So the biggest emphasis is with the province, followed by the municipalities. The federal government is further removed, and the risk there is they would do harm, like I mentioned, a capital gains tax on housing, which would be an atom bomb on supply and on the savings of middle-class Canadians. So what can the province do? I think it should reward municipalities that are being pro-home ownership. I think it should reduce the barriers of red tape and regulation that exist. It should reward municipalities that are modernizing their bylaws to allow for things, sounds like Windsor is doing, around intensification and innovation in the housing market. For example, the tiny homes people may find affordable. The bottom line here is you need to get more inventory into the marketplace, more supply and more choices. If you want home ownership to stay within reach for that millennial daughter who's got a great job, got the education, but can't get out of her parents' house, focus like a laser on increasing choice in the marketplace.
Thanks very much for the question, Rich. The next question comes from Jacob Barker at CBC. Jacob, go ahead, enable your microphone, please. Jacob, go ahead.
I think he's typing it.
Okay, very good. While he types, we do have another question coming in from Dave Battigello by text at Windsor Star, directed to Mr. Hunt and Mayor Drew. Are any changes to rent control policies possible, please?
Not from my perspective. The best, I think, opportunity that we're going to have is, as Tim had mentioned, is to provide the opportunities and the range of housing. So we'd rather use the carrot rather than the stick, and the carrot tends to be the incentives. So providing development charge reduction, providing other types of residential incentives across the board for different sectors of the market, I think is really what we're going to focus on. Rent control had its problems in the past, and it's a provincial initiative, obviously. So it's not something that we are lobbying for. We think that we have the right tools to build the inventory. A lot of folks won't go into developing multi-res category apartments, if you will, because they don't want rent control. So that would actually, I think, create a situation where it stifles the market. The best thing that we can do is try and work with the market demands and provide the incentives where we need where the barriers are, and reduce those barriers economically.
Yeah, nothing more I can add except to concur with Thom that rent control would be a provincial policy initiative. We don't have the ability at a city level to do that. And I agree that on the supply side, that is where we're putting our focus and attention, trying to remove any and all barriers, red tape, and encourage developers to build as quickly as possible. And I would use Mr. Fari's development on the east side of the city as an example, where the city came forward with is coming forward with quite a large investment by way of the Brownfield CIP, but that entire development will be plus or minus $250 million when all completed. And you will see, and I was speaking with them today, an additional 2 low-rise apartment units. The plans are coming, gents, for two more low-rise units out there to try and meet the demand that they're seeing in the marketplace. So that's happening faster than anticipated.
Thanks for the question, Dave. Jacob has typed out his question directed to Mayor Dilkens and Mr. Hunt. Is supply the only solution for the housing market? What type of solutions from government would you be seeking? And what other measures, other than seeking more supply, can help keep things affordable for people?
So I think this is a conversation that's going on provincially, and all of the areas, as I mentioned earlier, my colleagues, a lot of them in the GTA area, are struggling with the affordability issue. And there are a number of provincial ministries looking at exactly that policy framework. So What I suspect will happen is there's going to be more permissive policy direction out of the province to municipalities to be able to come up with a suite of incentives that'll be a bit layered. So there could be a federal incentive as well as a provincial and then a local municipal incentive to provide for opportunities for affordable housing and mix those into private development. So where there's a real good, robust private development economy, we want to see a portion or a percent of those units become affordable. So the planning term that you'll hear used is inclusionary zoning, which really means provide a certain percent, a smaller percent of units within a larger development as affordable, and then let the free market majority in that development float and cover for the cost of the affordable units.
Thanks very much. Our final question comes from Rich Garten at CTV. Go ahead, Rich.
Hey there. At risk of being a bit repetitive, inventory has been stated as kind of the #1 thing that we can do: build more inventory. But it's kind of a long game, as we all know. Between the permitting process and then actually putting those houses up, it doesn't happen overnight. So if that's a long game, and let's say from beginning to end it takes 2 years from the thought of building a home to actually building it, what do those people do who can't get into the market over the next 2 years while we try to work to build up that inventory?
So currently those folks are known to us, and they're on a list. And our social services department has emergency funds and available places to put folks that are in dire need of housing. So most municipalities deal with that through their social services department, and we're no different. We certainly deal with that. There are challenges currently, especially with COVID, but that is not something that we don't do as a municipality. But our best efforts are more longer term focused, as the panel suggested today, that we're trying to build the supply as fast as possible. And as you do that, you tend to then, from a long-term perspective, solve the issue. But the more acute, shorter term is dealt with by our social service department.
Yeah, and Rich, let me jump in here, because I appreciate that question, and I know some folks want an answer today. And of course, that the city proper doesn't really, we're not really home builders as an entity. We have to work with others to get that done. And even the Meadowbrook project, which is about 145 units, that project's plus or minus $50 million. And the city investment was over $12 million on our side. And that helped unlock lots of program through CMHC to be able to see that project move forward. But the planning horizon and the execution of that and the full construction and the appeal process, some of the things are just outside of our control. But I'll tell you, from a city perspective, the one area that I'm very, very excited about moving forward is the Sandwich South lands. And we have worked for many years putting together the official plan amendments and the secondary plan. And of course, everyone is well aware in the community about the appeals that have happened over a number of years on that particular site. And just when we thought we were getting to the end, the Conservation Authority came in and said, well, actually, we need an elevation study. And so now they're back to the drawing board to do 18 to 24 months worth of work. We should have that elevation study completed this year, I'm told. And that, I think, Thom, correct me if I'm wrong, that is a pathway then to be able to receive plans of subdivision for Joe and his team to work through, or your team to work through and Joe's team to work through on the permitting side, to help someone like Mr. Habib, who has plans to build 1,000 homes on the tract of land that he owns in that area. And I know he's just one of many landowners, because we're talking about probably 6,000 acres of land. And so none of it is fast, but I'll tell you, we are working as diligently as we can on our side to help get over the humps that are often outside of our control, because we recognize there's a need. And we want to make sure that we're doing all we can to make sure that those folks who are waiting in the wings have the ability to find a place of their own that makes sense for them. And so 1,000 homes being constructed in that area that will make a big dent. Vince, correct me if I'm wrong, but that will have a huge impact as that development unlocks itself once the Conservation Authority has given their stamp of approval on the elevation side.
Mr. Hudak?
Yeah, I'd just on that last question on what the province or the national government could do that's not only on the supply side. Number one is helping people with their down payment. As Damon and I had talked about, that's often the biggest obstacle for first-time home buyers. So there are new financial technologies that basically co-invest with an individual. They help her make that down payment, and it's kind of like a modern rent-to-own program, where then she would pay them back over time, a little bit extra to pay back that co-owned share. Or when the home is sold down the road, the investing company gets a share of the profits from that sale. Now, the federal government has done that with their first-time home buyer program. They could expand that and help out first-time home buyers in Windsor and or partner with these new real estate technologies. The other area we could focus for immediate impact is on people who are like empty nesters. They're probably overhoused. They're in the traditional family unit. They have not downsized yet. One way of doing this is waiving land transfer taxes. That's a tax you pay when you buy a home. So if that was released by the province, you'd probably create more inventory right away. You say, okay, I'll downsize. I can still live near the grandkids in Windsor, but I'll go to a condo, for example. We know this works because right now in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has waived the stamp duty, which is their land transfer tax holiday. And that's created not only a big economic upsurge in the UK, but it's brought a lot more inventory and transactions by eliminating that major tax to selling your home.
Thank you very much. Any other answers to the final question? All right. I think we'll leave it there for today. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're 6 minutes over mark, so I appreciate you all hanging out. I appreciate you all being here. Tim, Vince, Thom, Damon, Joe, thanks for your time today. Insightful conversation, and appreciate all that you're doing on your respective ends to help work through this situation that we find ourselves in. Some of it is great news. Some of it puts some challenges on each of us, but we'll work through those challenges and come out better on the other end, especially when we're past the COVID virus. And we can all move forward together with a vaccine and see great things happen across our province. So thanks all for being here, and media and members of the community watching, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.